And just being honest as well. I think that's a big thing. And that comes into my kind of integrity value, is I'm just honest with what I know and what I don't know, and where people have the skills to lead, and where I might need to like lean on them or need their guidance in certain areas. I think that's a really key aspect of building that trust and being honest and vulnerable with people.
Hi, I'm Sehaam Cyrene. Welcome to the Leaders Who Coach podcast. I teach leaders how to use coaching skills with their teams, peers, clients, and yes, even their bosses, so they can be more influential and have a greater positive impact. I'm so pleased you're here for the conversation that we're going to have today with my guest, Simon. Simon is a graduate of Leaders Who Coach. He's an experienced engineering leader whose career spans education, legal, insurtech, fintech, and now a major global technology company. We're going to get into what have been the most valuable mindsets, skills, and techniques that continue to work for him today. So in addition to that, our focus topic is relationships and behaviors. A little bit more about my guest. Simon served as head of engineering in a fast-growing startup scale-up where he built high-performing teams and scalable systems to support the rapid growth that they were charged with. Music to my ears, he is deeply passionate about coaching and enabling individuals and teams to thrive in what are sometimes really complex, high change, high pressure environments. He's very much values led, which was one of the things that we kick off with in the program Leaders Who Coach. He's got a strong strategic mindset. He's thoughtful. Putting people at the center of all his interactions is super important to him for resilience, collaboration, and performance. And all of that leads to, as we know, a high trust relationship, which is really important in leadership. So welcome, Simon.
Hi, Sehaam. Thank you so much for the introduction, and delighted to be here.
My pleasure. I'm really excited that you're here. So you graduated February 2022. Why don't we kick off with where you were at before then, and maybe a little bit about your experience, your career, what was going on while you were doing the course, and then perhaps after, as a sort of starting point for us.
Yeah, sounds good. It's been a little while since I graduated, and I've been putting into practice so much of what I've learned since then. Been in a leadership role for 5 years as an engineering manager at a law firm based in London prior to joining a kind of insurtech scale up. So a number of my colleagues had done Leaders Who Coach and had highly recommended it. And it was something that I kind of jumped at the chance to get involved in. Prior to that, I'd been an engineer before moving into leadership for kind of 9 years or so. But as I say, had been in a management role for 5 years. Thought that I knew what coaching was, thought that I was good at it, and quickly realized I knew very little and had so much to learn. So it was, I very much, not to exaggerate, kind of saw it as a turning point in my kind of leadership career, and really quite transformational to how I lead, how I coach people. And I almost kind of see it as a before Leaders Who Coach and kind of after, really. Like I said, been building on those kind of skills and experiences ever since. So since then I moved on from the insurtech organization where I was when I did Leaders Who Coach. My last organization was Taraba, fintech, Middle Eastern kind of startup scale up. I was there for 2.5 years and had the opportunity to be head of engineering there. So it was very much kind of leading teams, but leading a bit more strategically as well. All good things that I was able to, good opportunities to put what I'd learned into practice.
Yeah, brilliant. Big question, but what has stayed with you the most from doing the course?
Yeah, I think there's a few key things. You mentioned the values at the start, and that being one of the early things that we kind of cover in the course. That was huge for me. It really helped me understand who I was as a leader and as a person, and build my own self-awareness. And on one side, kind of established what my values were. It just helped me make a lot of sense of things that happened in my career, things that I found, particularly at times where things were challenging or I'd found things difficult. It really helped me to understand actually now I know why that is, and I can address it and raise it in a constructive way rather than feeling emotional about it or finding it challenging. I've used that with so many of the people that I've led since then. So in terms of kind of building relationships with new team members, helping them identify their own values has been huge. And there was an engineer I worked with who, this was at Zigo, the InsurTechs, not long after I'd completed the course. It was the first time he was working, and all of my, sorry, I probably should have clarified, all of my roles have been kind of remote for the last 5 years. So to sort of building those relationships, building the trust is that added complexity. And this was somebody else who'd recently joined the organization who was concerned about being able to, again, build that kind of trust and relationship with peers and a manager. And I did the values exercise with him and went through those kind of stages. And it was just amazing how, after that point, so many of the conversations we had and the challenges he was facing, he was able to attribute back to his values and was able to do that himself. So just that self-awareness is really significant. And that has always really stuck with me. And like I say, it's still something I do today with as many of my employees as I can. I think the other areas that jumped out and were feedback. Like I think I remember when we were doing our coaching sessions, the kind of practice ones, and the rest of the group were listening and providing feedback. I remember I finished my session and I remember you were the first one to give feedback, and you were very direct and to the point, and it was really like you basically said to me, you asked leading questions and you were stacking your questions, and I remember being a little surprised, but just it was really transformational in terms of, for me as a leader, in terms of how to give feedback, because I knew that you cared and I knew that you wanted me to succeed. And I knew you were telling me that because you wanted me to be better and a better leader. And it just really stuck, both in terms of I really try not to ask leading questions or stacking my questions anymore. So that aspect really, really stuck with me, and also just transformed how I provide feedback to people in my team, and how important it is when you care about them to really be able to want them to improve and develop, and feedback is so crucial to that. So yeah, it really helped me kind of transform my thinking around that.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing those. Yeah, the personal values is nice because it's a shorthand, right? It's a shorthand to figure out, why am I feeling difficult or challenged about this situation? And to be able to reflect on your values gives you kind of an instant sort of read of, oh, that's why, because I'm not able to be creative, right? Or I haven't got autonomy here. And that's what's frustrating. So yeah, and I love the fact that you've used it in a way that helps people even understand their own past experiences, right? Understand their past journey, where they felt like they were going through either a tough time, or they faltered, or, didn't show up in the way that they would have liked. And because we all have those moments, right? We all have moments where we might have a bit of regret about how we showed up under pressure. So yeah, it's a gift, right? To give people that awareness of themselves is a gift. Same for you, same for the person that you did the exercise with, and I'm sure many more who, those conversations, holding that space for someone to really explore what's important to them is quite rare.
Yeah, I fully agree. And again, I think that has been the key takeaway that again, I still try to always make time for. And I think, again, another example was with a different engineer. We were actually in the office on this occasion, although kind of mostly a remote role. And I just remember this was somebody else I'd done the values with, and made sure I put in plenty of time for that space for them to explore kind of the challenges and what was going on for them. And I think certainly as a leader, and this is probably the big transformation for me as well, is that I used to think I had to solve everybody's problems. And when your teams grow and grow and grow, like it becomes completely unmanageable. And when I realized what sort of true empowerment really is where, in my view, it's helping somebody to solve their own problems, and kind of coaching them and supporting them through that. That shift in terms of the time and capacity, the pressure you're under as a leader completely changes. And I remember the kind of best example of this was the engineer I mentioned. We were having a one-to-one. We had 45 minutes set aside for it in person. We had a room booked. He came into that space very visibly kind of stressed, under pressure, quite low energy. And the first thing in my kind of go-to is always like, what's on your mind? Like, what can we kind of explore here? What's important to you? And listening and like really listening, not thinking, what am I going to say next? Or what do I need to do? But just really trying to understand what the problems and challenges were for him. And then helping him understand that, almost kind of summarizing what he'd said and repeating it back to help him, to make sure I've understood, but also just kind of give him that context to then explore the solutions. And most people are incredibly smart and know what they're doing. Like in this situation, it was just a case of giving him that time and asking the right questions for him to explore the various solutions and know what he needed to do. And he left that room kind of, I think we'd wrapped up a bit quicker, 30, 40 minutes later, full of energy, knowing exactly what he needed to do and just completely transformed. And I barely spoke in that time. It was all him doing the hard work. And it was that moment when I came out of that meeting that I was like, okay, this is where I can add real value. This is where I can make a significant difference. And he is a team leader leading other team members. He could then go and have that like similar impact on them, having come out of that completely changed in terms of his mindset and ability to go and solve the challenges that he had. So it was a bit of a kind of light bulb moment, really. And I think that shift from thinking that as a manager you have to solve everyone's problems to actually moving towards how do I help them solve their own problems. The techniques and skills I've learned have been really significant in that.
Yeah, not doing the heavy lifting, right? Not doing the heavy lifting. But what I love about what you shared is the noticing of his energy and the fact that you allowed him that space to think through what was on his mind, what were his blockers, and mentioning that he's very capable and smart. He knows exactly what to do, but it was just that giving someone that space, isn't it, to unpack stuff, no judgment, just and not saying very much at all. I think that was one of the first things we learn, isn't it, is we have such a desire to help someone that we think we're being helpful by telling them what we've done or how we've solved it or how we might go about resolving something. But actually, we need to pull that back. And it is one of the hardest things to learn to do, right? You mentioned earlier, you thought you knew what coaching was until you joined the course. Could you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think it probably kind of follows on from the last point quite well.
Yeah.
I sort of felt that so one of my core values, my three values are caring, integrity, and empowerment. And I thought that I was really good at empowering people. So I think what I probably did quite well was give them responsibility and autonomy, but I didn't necessarily give them that. It was probably still over prescriptive. So kind of almost telling them how to go and solve their own challenges, solve the challenges rather than giving them the tools to go and solve them themselves and being there to provide that support. So I think that was a big part is for me coaching, and again, because it's so aligned to one of my core values is all about how I empower people to be their best and to be able to use those skills and techniques, like we've talked about, the active listening, the time and space that they need, no judgment, but just being there to ask the right questions at the right time and really help somebody reach their full potential and really grow. And so much of that, again, the caring aspect of my values is like, although we're at work and although there's always things to deliver and our main goal is for the organization to succeed, I want everybody I work with to grow and to develop, and wherever they end up in their career, I want them to come away from the experience of working together, having learned things and developed themselves. And that's where I see coaching and the techniques that you teach on the course and I've learned and put into practice for so long is really helping somebody to develop and become the best version of themselves. And a key part of that is that empowerment piece to not just have autonomy or responsibility, but actually to feel that they're growing and developing the skills that they can solve their own problems.
Absolutely. And I hear that really strongly in your, you mentioned caring and integrity. They kind of go hand in hand, don't they? They are the things that are driving you to want to see that in people, and just to even express that that's what you want for people, right? You want people to feel that they're achieving their best and that they are able to contribute in that way. So many threads here to pull on. So I'm gonna, stacking questions was my thing to fix when I started coaching, and realizing that our language is so loaded so much of the time. And actually, you in a leadership role, it's really important that you're aware of what language you are using or how you approach a conversation, right? Because your people are going to default to you, right? You said, this is how to do it. Okay, that's how I'm going to do it. You're the boss. And so being mindful of that is quite liberating in a sense, right? That and the combination of not doing the heavy lifting, of just creating that space, not feeling like you have to have the answers. And I think that in itself is massive, isn't it? Leaders feel like, I'm responsible for all these people. I need to be the one that comes up with the solutions.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think, yeah, I mean, I know that, I mean, I've been very fortunate in the last kind of, in the organization I've worked in, I've worked with incredible people and amazing engineers. And I mentioned before, exceptionally smart and gifted people in terms of like all part of my background into getting into leadership was I always knew I wasn't going to be the strongest engineer or didn't have the same passion that I do for people and wanting to develop people. And that's my passion. I wouldn't want to do it in any other industry, but it's like working with incredible engineers is, I feel lucky, and other, other roles within the businesses as well.
So it's the responsibility that we feel as leaders to
Yeah.
have the answers.
Yeah. So yeah, I think working with amazing people, like I know that every person that I manage is stronger than me in their area, and that is incredibly liberating to be able to trust them and empower them and help them go and develop themselves in that area. It's a huge, I think, again, going back to kind of the shift after I completed Leaders Who Coach. I think prior to it, I was a lot more stressed, a lot more, like we talked about, needed to feel like I fixed everything to feel so liberated and calm in my role and be able to admit that to the rest of the team, that kind of calmness and assurance and just being honest as well. I think that's a big thing. And that comes into my kind of integrity value, is I'm just honest with what I know and what I don't know, and where people have the skills to lead and where I might need to lean on them or need their guidance in certain areas. I think that's a really key aspect of building that trust and being honest and vulnerable with people about where I'm at and my abilities and how they can develop. I think let's develop.
I think, and you were saying it's a relief, isn't it? It's a relief to feel that you don't have to have the answers. And actually, there's an opportunity for growth of the individual if we can create that space and not feel like we have to have the answers. I mean, that is kind of part of the deal, right? Is your responsibility as a leader is, yes, to be strategic and to grow the capability of your team so that you can deliver on that strategy, right? But if we don't create those spaces for people to step into, to know their own minds, to develop a point of view, or to develop an approach and have that grounded in their own why, their own values, then we make ourselves the bottleneck. We create a bottleneck in our teams, right? We create a dependency on ourselves, which no one really wants, right? You want that. You want to feel like you can trust your team and they can deliver. And if you're not there, they'll know exactly how to execute and what to do. And you to have that peace of mind that they can do it. You can predict what they've done because you've been in those conversations at depth about how they think about stuff, how they approach problems.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think, yeah, giving people the responsibility, as I mentioned before, truly empowering them. I think giving them what I found particularly in my last role and again, probably remotely is giving people the purpose, like helping them understand how do they fit in to the bigger picture? How do they contribute to what the company are trying to achieve, and also personally, how are you setting them up for growth in their future and setting those individual plans to help them develop and bringing that all together and ensuring that I, as a leader, provide all the information regularly and often to give them the tools essentially to go and succeed and then step back, and kind of let them give them that autonomy and responsibility to go and deliver. And that, again, as a leader, has given me so much more time to operate in different areas and for me to grow and have more responsibility. And I think when I think back again to like the 5 years before doing Leaders Who Coach and changing roles, there was a lot of delivery focus, again, trying to solve all the problems, very stressed. I found, whereas to look at me today as a leader, much more calm and trusting and getting different responsibility and able to step into different spaces and helping to grow individuals in as well as part of that. Which fundamentally for the organization is hugely beneficial as well. So it's, for me, it kind of feels win-win really. And it's something, again, like especially starting a new role now, I'm already engaging in these conversations with people as to really helping them try and for me as well to help me understand what information do I need to provide to my team to allow them to be successful. How can I set the purpose and give them the goals and the personal goals to really develop? And I think it's so crucial as a leader to perform that role and not just be busy and be the bottleneck and do everything, because it's unsustainable and it can lead to stress and burnout. And I think as a leader, you're not doing yourself any favors in that regard. Having a really good understanding of your team and your people is pivotal, because going through redundancy is incredibly difficult. And I think is incredibly difficult having been on both sides for everyone involved. I think even as leaders who need to kind of help set the strategy and drive the business forward, it still really hurts to let good people leave and know that you're potentially impacting their lives. And for the people that go, obviously there's that kind of shock and difficulty processing the information, and then the concerns about needing to find a new role and everything else. But for people in the team who work alongside those who are being made redundant, it's really difficult for them, arguably more so than anybody else in some ways, because I think there's a lot of guilt about potentially them being the ones that remain. There can often be like kind of fear for the future, and often they're picking up work from their peers that they will now be responsible for and need to do more than they did before, and just losing friends and colleagues that they've worked with for long periods of time. So I remember when I was made redundant, there was two in a team of kind of five. Like one of the teams I managed, there was four people in that team and me as the manager. Two of them were being made redundant, two staying. And I remember when we had a team meeting, we were discussing, it was the three of us who were going that were positive and upbeat and energetic, and the two who were staying who were very sort of downbeat. And I think there's so many different aspects going on for people during that time. And I think me having self-awareness and my values to stick to during that period was crucial. I always wanted to be the one delivering the news, even when I'd been made redundant and needed to tell my team, like for me, that again, that integrity, that caring part, I wanted to be the one to tell them and support them through it. I think knowing your values and knowing what's important to you and adhering to those through what is a really difficult process allows you to still carry on, essentially. And I think then by understanding your team and your people, especially for those that are remaining, that essentially you kind of need to get, like having done that 4 times where people in the team have gone, you've got to, like, trust has been broken and you kind of need to rebuild that and get people going again to still want to stay at the organization. And what was amazing, like my last company, was retention was still really strong. And I think a key part of that for me was just being really honest with people, but also understanding their different needs. And that again was about creating the time and space. Some people, would not be affected that much and would be ready just to carry on and just want to be busy. Other people might need a lot more time and a lot more conversations, a lot more reassurance, a lot more kind of clarity on their future specifically. And again, as a leader, being flexible, really making the time for your people. Again, really listening and not just assuming that you know the answers, but actually finding out what is important to each individual can be huge to helping guide them through what can sometimes be a really traumatic experience for people.
Right. And the better you know members of your teams, and back to what we were talking at the beginning, personal values, knowing what's important to them, and what the experience needs to be like for them to be able to move forward, whether they've been made redundant or they're staying. It's interesting. I was talking to a people and culture leader this morning about her experience from that side of things in taking people through redundancies. And we both agreed that, leaders really struggle with this piece because it's such an uncomfortable place to be. There's so many mixed emotions. There's, as you mentioned, we feel guilty, there's a bit of grief, there's hurt, and there's so much going on in that space that many leaders can feel like they just want to get through this as quickly as possible and to ease their own discomfort, which is completely understandable. But, they might have done better if someone had explained to them their role through this process. And it's okay to be with these big feelings, right? And what their role is in helping people move forward, not to rush through all these big emotions, because if we move through them too quickly, we effectively shove them under the carpet. And they'll surface again. Like you mentioned, trust is broken. It's really important to recognize that there is some repair work that's needed, that if you don't do, is going to come back to bite you later on in some shape or form. So, hearing you talk about that and knowing how you could stand strong in your own values feeds your own sense of integrity, because you can look back on that and go, I stood where I needed to stand and I showed up the way I needed to show up, rather than looking back and feeling a bit guilty or not wanting to think about it at all. I think the very fact that you are able to talk about it is a good sign that you navigated it in the best way possible, because I think if you haven't, you don't really want to go and visit that again, right? You don't want those feelings to surface again. So just that in itself, I think, is brilliant to do that. Yeah.
No, thank you. I think it's, every time it got a little bit, there was always something I would learn from it and take into the next one and think I would do this differently. But I think sticking to my core values throughout was what really got me through it and helped me understand how I was feeling and being honest and vulnerable with people. I was an employee like they were. I have a mortgage to pay and concerns about future. And for me, it was about just being vulnerable and honest and sticking to my values kind of no matter what. And that was what, like you say, there's always things I'll reflect on and try and do better and learn from. But actually, fundamentally, I tried to do the right things for the right reasons, and I have no regrets over that, because it's such a difficult period for people. And I think, like you say, as a leader, it's really important to show up and, for me, demonstrate that care and integrity to those people that built really strong and great relationships with, and didn't want to see any of them leave. But like you mentioned as well, also then repair that trust that people might have felt is broken with the organization or people that I think, in order to try and get things back on track. So it's, redundancy. I mean, I think we see a lot more of it and have done over the last few years in tech. Most of people that I've kind of worked with and spoken to have experienced it in some form. And again, just to kind of reiterate, don't think I would have dealt with it anywhere near as well had I not, again, been through this kind of transition of self-awareness, knowing what I stand for and what's important to me, and really getting to know the people in my team to support them in the best possible way that I could.
Yeah, they anchored you, didn't they? I mean, and that, I think that's the thing, is you are under so much pressure to get through this difficult period. If you don't have a way of anchoring yourself and having your own, guiding yourself through all the different conversations, you can default to, defensive behaviors, right? And you lose your compassion for people, right? Because it's an uncomfortable place. We can shut down emotionally for ourselves as well as others. But yeah, I think it's fantastic that has been helpful in that way, because it does impact so many people's lives. I mean, that, right? Whether you're still in touch with some people or not, we remember those moments. We remember difficult moments, forks in the road, right? Things were tough. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think as well, I fully agree with all of that. And it's, like I still think about the managers and how they've treated me and the impact that has. And like you say, that those people who have really put in the care, like, you remember it, and it's really significant. And I think as leaders, it's really important to remember that and take that and try and always, I think you describe it really well, showing up for your team and your people in the way that you want to, or the way that really resonates with your values. And I think, like, following redundancy, I think the other kind of area that is really important, because it is a difficult job market. Like, I interviewed quite a bit before getting the role that I'm in now. I think, again, having that anchor of these are my values, this is what I believe. I'm not just going to take any role because for the sake, I want to join an organization that aligns with who I am and my values. And I think that is, for anybody, of which I know there are a lot going through that kind of experience as a leader, I think it's vitally important to have that kind of self-awareness and stick to your values during what can be challenging times. Like, I always knew quite quickly whether an organization might be the right one and whether the manager was the right one and whether I would want to kind of continue those conversations with them and continue an interview process, because, again, just that self-awareness and almost kind of sticking to your guns a little bit is, for me, it was really important during that period.
Isn't that interesting? I'm hearing that a lot more, that knowing what's important to you and the kind of environment that you want to work in helps you make decisions about roles, just in the same way that an organization is looking to hire. So it really has become this two-way street, where it's as much about finding a place where you can thrive and have the impact that you want to have because of your values and how you feel about working with people, that being a priority, right? Because if you've got those dynamics, right, Simon, the team is healthier. There's a much healthier, more joyful dynamic that goes on between your teams, right? We can have that generosity among our team. We can have it, that collaboration between functions or between teams becomes so much easier. And we know that works, right? We know that delivers the kind of work environment that is stimulating and enjoyable. So, and I think that's a part of it. I wonder whether, we, at some point, we came to a place in leadership where we just accepted that, it's stressful and tough, and that kind of goes with the territory, and not actually challenge that assumption and thought, actually, I want to do this job because I can do this job, but I want to enjoy it as well. I want to enjoy the people I'm with when I'm doing it.
Yeah, 100%. And I definitely enjoy it way more since doing Leaders Who Coach. So, I think we've used the words kind of liberating and freedom. And I think when I look back at my time before, and we mentioned regrets and things, like some of language I'll have used or my demeanor or things that just didn't align with my values that I reflect on now and have regrets about, that I don't think in the last kind of 4 years at work I've raised my voice why should I? It seems kind of to me now like sort of mad that that was ever a tool that felt effective, because it's just not. I've just found it to be not necessary. I think if you're giving people very clear expectations and you've been very honest in giving direct feedback, and it no longer becomes like, and I think, I mean, we touched on feedback a little bit. I used to find it incredibly difficult, and I would just, I would feel like adrenaline pumping, and it would almost feel like ready for a kind of flight or fight type scenario. And yeah, and it would just come across in the wrong way completely, and just never actually deliver kind of what it needed to for that person. And I think now where I'm at a stage where, again, because I genuinely care about people and I know that the feedback I provide is so vital for their development. I mean, if I don't provide feedback to them, I'm doing them a disservice. And that is what I always kind of stick to and remember, to ensure that I do provide it, even when it might feel like a tough thing to do. I'm not doing the right thing by them if I don't provide this. And again, it's providing it calmly and factually. And one of the ways in which I approach it now is presenting the facts and saying, look, I observed this, or this is what happened. Like, tell me more, like go into it, like being inquisitive and being genuinely interested in kind of what the reasoning or rationale is for why certain situations or events have happened. And yeah, it's like I say, it's completely transformed the way in which I behave as a leader, and can just operate in a calm manner without ever needing to turn to raising my voice or anything else. So, which as I say, seems kind of crazy.
Right.
Was ever an approach.
But interesting, isn't it? The feedback, I think I hear this from leaders a lot, like, even when it comes to performance, like those annual performance reviews, what do I say in that box that says, how this person could improve? There's instant stress around it, isn't there? And actually, ideally, you want to have that two-way communication happening constantly, not just at certain points of the year, because that puts massive pressure on everyone to provide something useful, but to say something also that somebody isn't going to take offense at or will take in the right vein. And it misses opportunities throughout the year, throughout a project, throughout collaboration, to really improve incrementally. Because, we don't really do big changes. We're humans. We do little incremental changes, right? And I think that thing, how you approach it and what you see, why you see it as valuable, is important. But, it also relies on trust. You having a quality of a relationship with that person so that they know you have their best interests at heart, and that it comes from a place of caring. And then combine that with the language you use, how you show up in that conversation. Like you said, tell me more, what happened there? That's an opportunity to realign on what, happened and what could be better. But that, seeing that opportunity for them to grow and how you state that, for example, my sense is that you could have a much richer conversation with so-and-so if you tackled it with this approach. What do you think about that? Do you think that might be something that would be useful to you? And then helping them work through that so that they build that awareness, they build that skill and ability to work with others. And that's great feedback. This idea that you have to be really direct. Yes, that's important. More about being clear than being direct, right? Giving someone clarity is really important. We should be appreciating and acknowledging what people do great, right? And what we feel as their manager would make them even better, have more impact, and how you can support them to achieve and practice that skill and get better at it. And that's you being strategic, right, as a leader, and growing the capability of individual members of your team. So they're confident, they can tackle problems without you. You can go on holiday and not have to worry that something, if something escalates, the team can handle it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, I think clarity is definitely a better description than being direct, because and I think we've touched on it a few times, haven't we? That our words matter as a leader, and probably more than we want to admit or know. So it's so important to be considered and to think clearly and provide that clarity to people. I think again, I think there's a big part of this is also about being vulnerable and open and honest about like where I've made mistakes and where I don't know things, where I've got things wrong, because I think one, that helps build a lot of trust, but it also, it just hopefully creates that space for people to also know that it's okay that everything isn't right all the time. There's always room, like we can all grow and we can all learn and we can all develop. And I think if you're open as a leader in that way, it just sets the right example for the rest of the team to know that it's okay to make mistakes, and actually it's a place of learning and development, and really try and foster that psychological safety.
And that segues beautifully into my last question for you. The conversation's gone way too quick, Simon, but my question really is, what advice would you have for new and emerging leaders who want to show up perhaps in a different way to what they see around them?
Yeah, I think, we've talked a lot about values and the importance of that. I'd recommend all leaders to really understand what they stand for and what's important to them. I'd advise everybody to do it, but I think for leaders more than anyone, it can be a real game changer in terms of how they lead. I think I wish if I could go back and give myself advice, like when I first moved into a leadership role, it would be to not solve. I would say to myself, don't try and solve everybody's problems. Like I think it's a really hard when people move from an individual contributor to leadership and everything that they've done before has been measured by like outputs or impact. It's very different when you're not necessarily seeing direct output of what you're doing. And I think that is a real shift in mindset. But I think if you go into it knowing that you don't have to solve everybody's problems, but actually if you help them to develop and grow and be able to solve their own problems, but you're there in their corner, backing them up, supporting them, having great conversations with them, giving them that time and space, then you as a leader are just making your life so much easier, but also your team will be so much more grateful to you for it. So I think that would be the kind of really standout piece of advice that I would give to anybody stepping into a leadership role.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. I've got nothing more to add to that. I think you said that wonderfully. Thank you so much, Simon, for joining me today. I've really, really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Sehaam. It's been really wonderful, and it's been so nice to reflect on the course and everything I've learned from it. And yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of continuing to work together in the future. And I really appreciate you inviting me along. So thank you.
Brilliant. And I hope your team appreciate the impact that you're having, right? And how you're showing up. So, that's through your own investment. So brilliant. We'll talk some more, I'm sure.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Do check out the links, the playlist, and make Leaders Who Coach a regular thing for you. You can also start your journey by downloading the Leaders Who Coach app, where you can complete the foundation module of Leaders Who Coach absolutely free. And the values that Simon and I have talked about today, you can go there and do the exercise. You can discover your personal values. There's also a little conversation exercise, Simon, I don't know if you remember that, uncovering your blind spots, and learn more about coach leadership and how coaching skills can make you more influential, and how you can enjoy leading teams with way less heavy lifting, as Simon said, not having to have the solution every time. Thank you for joining us.